Hello there, welcome back to DSR Ghostwriting's YouTube channel, also putting these out on LinkedIn. My name is Daniel Rosehill. I am the founder, writer, creator, marketing consultant behind DSR Ghostwriting, which is a writing and marketing consultancy focused on helping clients in the technology sector, whether individuals, companies, or agencies, to develop and execute compelling thought leadership programs that lead to better brand visibility, lead generation, and ultimately sales. So in this video, I want to talk through another frequently asked question, another FAQ in the thought leadership series. And that's as follows. Should I be the thought leader or should my company be the thought leader? Now, in some instances, there is no real separation. In my case is actually a good example. I am effectively DSR ghostwriting. Let's take a more typical example of a thought leader, and that would be somebody who is, a solo entrepreneur, actually running a business that's creating an enterprising product. In that case, does it make more sense to attribute the thought leadership collectively to the company, even if that's a myth of sorts, or does it make more sense to focus on a more personal branding centric thought leadership campaign targeted around the person? So interesting question. Let me give you some thoughts about when each approach suits better. So firstly, thought leadership can definitely be attributed to a company. So companies can have their own brand and brand voice, and individuals in the company can be sufficiently prominent if they kind of serve as the frequent spokespeople for the company, that they have a personal brand that's kind of their company hat personal brand, if you will, that when they're speaking for the company, they have a certain way of communicating whatever it is they do, whether they're the chief marketing officer, the CTO, not a CXO. They have a brand and the company has a brand, and those are two separate things. So yes, it's possible to do thought leadership for a company, if you will. Now, in terms of formats, this also makes a difference because there are different formats that lend themselves to different types of accreditation. So for instance, articles would typically be attributed to an individual on blog posts. So that's one where those would be used mostly for individual thought leadership. White papers, on the other hand, are more often attributed collectively. I have seen white papers byline to an individual, but more typically those are put out by either the whole company, and that's of course a fiction. The entire company didn't sit down together to write this white paper, or by marketing team, somewhat team, customer success team, etc. A collective byline. So that's one consideration, is what you're using and what you're planning on using for the thought leadership. And likewise, you can decide whether it's better to do personal or collective thought leadership. And based on that, you can decide upon which assets would be most appropriate to leverage in that campaign. So one thing that does make a difference here is how personal the message is. So when we're looking at thought leadership, we're very often focused on driving a few core messages and really trying to bring those out to our market, our readership. So sometimes the narratives are themselves quite personal. For instance, if the narrative of a company is inextricably bound up with its origin story, and its origin story is inextricably bound up with something that the founder or founders did, then in that case, personal thought leadership might make more sense. Two guys were in the Air Force. They became friends. They saw that the Air Force was doing something stupid. They decided to invent a better solution in their spare time in a garage, and thus our company was born. I'm giving a sample narrative based on something kind of similar I came across recently. So that would be an example where I would say it's more effective to create thought leadership under the byline of, in that case, the founder or both founders. Give them separate voices, but the company can have its voice, but they can be thought leaders telling their story and integrating their story into their overall messaging. On the other side, the flip side, when might it be more sensible to have collective thought leadership? So I would say an example would be in big companies, large or medium, and I'm using, as someone who works with a lot of startups, I'm using medium, kind of almost subconsciously put that into the large bracket because, you know, that can be a few hundred people already. If you're working in that size an organization, you might find that there's a need to white label your thought leadership. So what I mean by that is we might create a few pieces of thought leadership, and the idea would be that those would be spun out to various important spokespeople in the organization, rewritten essentially, each for a different person. So perhaps one by the CEO of a subsidiary, one rewrite for another subsidiary CEO, that kind of thing. So that's quite a good thought leadership strategy, creating a bank of content and then remixing that out. I always use the word remix because I like remixes. Because it's logical, right? You can have many remixes on a track. So you can have a couple of pieces of thought leadership and spin those out to important execs in the company, and those will be unique. So in that case, you know, that's kind of company thought leadership, unattributed, leave it blank, leave it evergreen, and then whoever needs it can put their spin on it and put it out to market. So finally, pick your spokespersons wisely. So if you're doing this, just remember that you're not just putting a byline to a piece of authorship. Every time you're attributing thought leadership to somebody, you are building into that individual's personal brand. So you have to make sure that the messaging and the thought leadership is congruous with the thought leadership that individual has written to date and will be writing in the future. There shouldn't be an obvious disconnect. Hope that's been useful. If you are interested in learning more about DSR Ghostwriting and the thought leadership planning and execution service that it offers, that I offer, then please check out dsrghostwriting.com. Lots of information there on the website. And until then, I look forward to bringing you another YouTube video soon.